Hey guys, I am Vanguard here with how to play video. The reason I wanted to try making these series is there was a new player at locals and I was kind of showing him how to play the Zorga deck. I was kind of backseating just to kind of show him what he can do, ideally what he can play. And he was mentioning that there wasn't a lot of content to show him how to play like newer decks. And we're getting a lot of players nowadays and I just feel like that these kind of videos were needed from my perspective. And I also wanted to try some new content other than the podcast, the shorts, and the live I've been doing. And it's been about 4 or 5 years since I made an actual video other than the podcast. And then I had some flexibility in the schedule, so I did want to give this a try. So let's get to it. Alright, first off, we do need to build a deck. The deck choices that you make are very important in this deck. So obviously, there is a couple choices that you can do. As you see here, I have the ride line as I picked. So as you see here, there are different choices. I got the starter here. Obviously, the starter, you can run any starter just because the fact that they all have the same effect. I guess it's more of a preference at this point, what you like. And then I know for Zorga, there's two ideally great ones that you can pick. There is the one that came in Divinez Set 2, and there is the old Zorga Ride Line. So the reason why I choose the older Zorga Ride Line is this is more consistent from my opinion. I feel like that Soul Blasting, drawing 2 cards, and discarding an order to maintain the extra card is a better choice. And this does have a secondary effect where if you play an order this turn, this gets an extra +2. So it's a guaranteed 10k booster since you are playing an order deck. Versus the other one, it has the same cost, but it's look at top 7 and then put a normal order to the drop and then put 1 unit to your hand. So I mean, there's some differences of choice. I know that a lot of decks at top use the older one, but for consistency purposes, I do think the older ride line is probably more preferable. And then for the grade 2, there is choices as well. This one here, if you do ride, it gets the order immediately to your hand, while this one, you do get to wait a turn. So I think that the order of when you can get your orders do matter towards the play. But I mean, honestly, there isn't really like too much of a difference between the two. But the thing is that I prefer to get it later just so like I can kind of set up my board a little early, because I feel like that if I can get my order too early, and if I don't have enough cards in my hand or something, that there's less choices. But they do get the same effects, where if you play order, this gets +5. So both of them are the same. So honestly, between the two, there isn't much difference. And obviously, you want to run your main grade 1, which is Zorga Nadir. Alright, so now we are building up the triggers. So obviously, there's some things that you do have to run. I do recommend running the 1OT. If you have a preference for this build, like I think the one interesting tech that you can try out is the red OT, which is basically if you hit the red OT, you can put it on a unit and restand it and attack again. If it has an attack. So it's not a bad tech. I feel like that it's a very interesting tech for this, but I just feel like the Stoicheia over trigger is probably just the best one suited for this clan, to be honest. So I feel like that the Stoicheia over trigger is fine. And then obviously you do want to run 4 heals. There's a variety of these. There's ones like with effects like on top, depending on their effects, you can use it. But I just feel like having a consistent 15k is much better than the effect ones, because there's so many situations that the effect ones really did not help because they were only 10ks, and there were situations I couldn't use it. So I mean, overall this is a preference. So if you do guys like the effect triggers and there's a lot of decks that you can use these for, definitely recommended. But from my preference, I haven't been able to use these correctly, or the situation just hasn't been right on a best of 1 format. So I just feel like that in a best of 1 format, running a 15k heal trigger is probably the most consistent ideal. So, but it's a pick and choose. You guys can honestly just run one of each in this, and you can probably still get it, because there's cards that can bounce out your hit triggers from the drop to the field and then bounce it back to your hand. So I mean, there's situations that you can technically kind of grind for, but this is a very glass cannon deck. So good defense does matter, and consistent defense does matter from my perspective. And then there's some choices here. Obviously, I am currently running the 8 crits. I did try the 4 fronts. I was running 4 fronts, which was also very effective. But it seems like a lot of people were just like no guarding the Vanguard. So I just feel like that running the extra crit was a little better in situation. And it seems like your rear guards are hitting enough, I think. So I think the hitting the front wasn't as like scary to the opponents, because they were all preparing to perfect guard the rear guards anyways. So like I said, this is a pick and choose, and the draws I feel like that you can try for your pieces, but once again, I feel like that this deck is more like need for defense than the pieces. So I feel like that running the 15k triggers defensively is more important, like such as the front triggers, the 20k defense. So I think here you can kind of tweak and see what you prefer. Um, some people like 4 fronts just because the extra defense that it gives, which is nice. So I mean, definitely give that a try and kind of tweak around it. Alright, this is kind of a given, but obviously you do want to run the 3 perfect guards, and then here you're deciding the blitz order. You're either running the Saint 2 that requires the 2 crests from the opponent, or the one that requires triple drive, but because of the meta how it is, with Liel and the Stride decks, I feel like that running the Saint 2 with the triple drive is more worth it at this point, because there's not a lot of decks that run 2 crests that is threatening you. But if I do have to choose a reason why I would run the new Sanctitude, is because of the fact that the crest decks like such as Night Rose can hit you early. So I feel like that for that reason, I might try out the Sanctitude, but it really varies on the meta. So I would say that these are the options that you would like to have as your Blitz Order Perfect Guard. Alright, in Zorga, it does really matter of what orders do you run in your deck, or how many orders do you play, also very matters in this deck. So in my case, I am running 12 orders in total. Of course, I am running the 2 Blitz order for defensive purposes. I could ideally run another Blitz order and just kind of use it as a guard purposes, but I feel like that there was a lot of situations that I didn't really need the 3rd Blitz order, because you are running Sanctitude as well, which is another Blitz order, and sometimes like running too many orders also clog your deck. So I just wanted to keep at a certain range, but I would say depending on your meta change, you can run more Blitz order, less of the regular orders. You can kind of swap it up, right? I just feel like that the flexibility with Zorga is that you can run 1 of each orders, you can run 2 of a certain order. That's really your choice how you want to do it. In my case, I put variety, and I picked up cards that I feel like that is relevant to the meta. One card that's very relevant to the meta is Angel Ladder. This card has been very effective in a lot of matches. It's not more because like you want to protect your rear guards. I think it's more because that there's like a certain matchup you want to screw over, which is like decks like Shoujo Doji or Shiranui such. But this could probably be replaced by the Grail or the Excalibur, which is a straight draw 2. Excalibur is not the Excalibur is probably more ideally the card I would run once the meta changes with the Shiranui and the Shoujo Doji rotation. So something that you can always leave as a flex base. And then yeah, I mean it's 1 of each. So there's situations that you need it for depending on the situation you're in. You can play the orders that you need. I would say these are pretty nice because they're free. This is for your retiring. If they have cards that are very annoying to you, you can use that to get rid of it. And then obviously these can be also put in depending on the matchups that you need. I would say just kind of see what your locals run, or like what's the meta at the time. That's really going to determine what orders you're going to play in your deck. Alright, so for the units, so as you know, because of the fact that you're running 12 of the order cards, and basically half your deck is triggers and perfect guards, so you don't really have that much flexibility in choosing units. So the one thing with Zorga is that you want to make sure you have the right units, because of the fact that you don't have a lot of space. So everyone's build varies, and this is just the version that I'm using that I felt like that it was more flexible for me. There are cards I can like kind of switch off depending on the meta, and that's like one of the best flexibility about Zorga is that you can kind of switch up. So I only run two of the Zorga Nadirs extra to the ride line. To be honest, you're not a deck that really depends on your persona riding. So I feel like that running less of the copy to make more space for other things is probably the more ideal thing that you want to do with this deck. But of course, like I said, it's a player's choice. At that point, you want to see that if that's the flexibility that you want in your deck or that's what you need. Like if you have a lot of Blingdemire players, you probably want to run extra copies of it. Just just as a safety net. Here, these are probably the choices that you guys were kind of seeing that, oh, he only runs this amount on this deck. So for my case, I do like the Prison Dragons more than Karna. So, because the thing is, Karna costs his energy to build the power. And, I mean, it does get the free crit, you're correct. But I prefer the 15k over the 10k when it comes to the crit. So I feel like that having the Prison Dragon is more flexible. But it's not, like, it's only one card difference. So this is something that you can also play around with as well. I know that some people run, like, 4 Prison Dragons, 2 Prison Dragons. That's really a choice that you have. But I think seeing the Prison Dragon is more important than seeing the Karnas from my perspective. So, of course, Karna does have shield and Prison Dragon doesn't, but it's not like your deck is a deck that requires the extra 5k shield in your deck anyway. So this is also a player's choice that you guys can kind of look into, see what you prefer at this case. So I know this is going to be the definitely the thing that a lot of people are like, oh, you only run 3 Shadow Cloaks. I would run 4 and blah blah blah, right? So once again, here is the reason why I run only 3 Shadow Cloaks versus 4. So as you see here, I am running 4 of the Philanders, which is basically what Shadow Cloak can do, but it can also discard units. So I feel here is that if I cut down Philanders, I would have increased the number of Shadow Cloaks, and it was a pick and choose situation, which I prefer Philanders over Shadow Cloak just because this, from my perspective, is something more I need in the deck versus Shadow Cloak. Because Shadow Cloaks, it puts the orders in the drop, which honestly, you don't want that many orders in the drop from my perspective. You actually prefer the orders in your hand so you can use it the next turn, is what I realized. So technically using Shadow Cloak isn't the most effective way to run this deck, at least from my opinion. Versus here, you run the 4 Philanders to dump out your Karnas, your Prison Dragons, your Great Ones here. So this actually filters more than the Shadow Cloak from my opinion. So I would definitely recommend Philander. I know that there could be some comments saying that, oh, well, what if you get top 5 and they're all triggers? I mean, sometimes it does happen, and I've experienced a couple times, like, but you know, that's just part of the variance in the decks. It's not because you filtered out everything else and you only have triggers left. It's more just it happened to be there and you can't really do anything, right? So, and like I said, Philander is more consistent the more you play the deck, is what I feel. So this is another pick and choose. It's kind of like the Prison Dragon Karna choice. It's kind of like the same thing with me with these two. And that's actually the reason why I put these two together. And then here, the rest of the 4 slot, and once again, this is another tech that you can also consider, right? So I run one of the Spoof Shade. A Spoof Shade is also considered as an order if you need it as a cost to discard. So there is one order card that requires discarding an order. So there's some situations that I know that I would need this card as a one-of. And this actually has a nice secondary effect, which if you Alchemagic this turn, this gets an extra 10k. So it's like a Philander guaranteed, versus the Philander, you do need the 10 cards in their drop to get the 10k. So this is a card that I personally really like having as a one-of. You don't have to run it. This is not a card I recommend for most people. It's just a personal preference at this point. And that's why I call these the flex phase. I am running one of the cards that came out, Hades, that came out in the set 4. So this card is really good just because that you can retire 2 cards and put an order to your hand. So sometimes on situations, there's like 2 dead prison dragons that was on the field. So I would just go ahead and use Hades effect, get rid of the 2 in the front row, and then use this effect to get an order to my hand, because you do need the order to your hand to activate the alchemy magic. So definitely recommend running one of it at least in your deck if you do have the flex space for it. This is a personal preference as well. I do run the Zorga booster, which is a 15k booster, and it also gives 10k to one of the units, but you do have to retire, which, I mean, you kind of do need to empty the board on some situations, depending on the matchup. So I think running 2 of her was just my ideal, because having her was so important versus like the other 2 here. But like I said, these 4 are the flex spaces, so this is where you can personally pick and choose from my opinion. So, and then some other choices I can do. Alright, so there are some other cards that you can try out in your deck. From my perspective, the stuff I have is the stuff I tested and I really like. But I know that there is the mask choice, right? The mask Zorga with the mask order combo is also pretty nice, because when you're at the peak and you're out of resources, right? Because sometimes with Zorga you survive enough, and you kind of run out of plays at certain points. The mask option isn't the worst choice in the world, and there is a guy in Japan that's been using the mask combo to win games with the Zorga Nadir. So that is like 2 card space that you can use to try out the deck. You can take out the Zorga and then take out another order to run the 2 cards in the deck, which, like I said, it's a tryout. I think it's a more aggressive version once you run out of resources and you have no other place to do. But me personally, I just don't really like that option, but it is something that you guys can try out. And then for the other flex spaces, there is Bell. So I think Bell is kind of nice on certain situations, because there are situations where I had too much order in the bind, and I felt like that I needed the 1 or 2 in the bind zone to activate Zorga's effect to call out 2 other units, right? So Bell kind of comes in handy because she gets the power for each of the order that you put back to the drop zone, which you do need, right? So sometimes there are situations that you do need it, but I just personally couldn't find the space for it because the fact that your space is too tight. So I'm just running cards that I feel like is more effective in the early game. So Bell is a good choice, and I do recommend it for those that are considering it. It's not a bad choice at all. The Sea Breeze, I personally seen people run it. The only reason why I don't like it is it's an on-hit ability, and you can bind another order from the drop. I prefer to bind the orders from Zorga's effect, so I don't really see the effectiveness of Sea Breeze. But there was a lot of people that like Sea Breeze personally, so once again, I think this is a choice that you would have to decide depending on your playstyle. So that is another card you can try out. The Headhunter was one of my favorites running in Zorga at a certain point, until I ran out of space, until I got my 4 Finlanders basically. The Headhunter is also nice because it gets a +5 if you have played an order, which, I mean, you're going to play every turn, right? And then when you need to alchemy magic and it costs a counterblast, the Headhunter makes it free. So that's another reason why the Headhunter is actually not the worst choice in the world for Zorga. So for those that are running out of counterblast with your decks, which, to be honest, if you're playing Zorga, there isn't really much things that you do need to counterblast for. But if you do need the extra counterblast to play your orders, Headhunter is actually the fantastic choice for it. And then Morpho is another card that I was playing for a little bit to fetch out Blitz orders and get another order to your hand and such. So I would purposely drop a Blitz order from hand to activate Morpho's effect to get a order to hand. So that was some of the things I had to do before I got the 4 Finlanders. So to build like consistency in your deck, you have to find other ways. Morpho was one of those cards that helped me with the consistency issues without Finlanders. So once again, if you guys can't afford 4 Finlanders, there are other choices here, as you see. So you can give those a try and see how they go in your deck. Alright, so I do want to go into the ideal discarding for Zorga. So when you're riding, right, there is a lot of factors that you have to decide. So I have shuffled the deck thoroughly. This is not filtered. Just want to show that I have shuffled the deck, and I did this plenty of times because I had the deck spread out to organize it, to show you guys like the deck choices or what you guys can do and such. So, alright, so fully shuffled. Let's say that your opponent did cut the deck. Okay. Okay, so it's cut. So you are gonna look into the top. You're gonna draw. Alright, so mulliganing is very a deciding factor. So technically, you don't need 2 Shadow Cloaks in your hand. You want to keep the 1 Cardna as your discard fodder. So you're gonna go ahead and mulligan 3. Depending on the matchup, you could keep like a trigger in your hand as well. Like I would keep the crit trigger versus the heal trigger. So something that you can decide. But in this case, like since you're actually trying to dig into your orders really hard, you do want to mulligan 3, and then you're gonna draw your cards. Okay, so you actually don't have an order, right? So this is actually perfect. So this gives you a deciding factor of how to get the order in your hand later on, ideally. So this is actually a pretty good setup for you to kind of show you that these are the ideal discard targets that you want to do. Okay. Alright, so you're gonna stand and draw. Let's say that you go first, right? Because it gives you less cards as an option. So more deciding factor here. So you want to discard between Karna and Prison Dragon. So let's go ahead and discard the Prison Dragon because that's a 5k shield that you can use later. So discard, you're gonna ride. Since you went first, you cannot draw the extra card. So this gives you more flexibility. So activate skill, you're gonna Soul Blast, draw 2. Right? Alright, so you did get an order. This is fantastic. So obviously now you're going to discard the order. Okay, cool. So now the opponent's going to attack you. Usually they're going to attack you with the 5k. They're going to force you a 1-card guard, right? So in this case, you want to ideally just go ahead and pitch the 50k. Or the heal. It doesn't really matter at this case, but this actually could come in more handy for you because it goes into soul. So let's say you're going to go ahead and pitch the heal, and then the attack doesn't go through. The reason why that you do want to guard early in this deck is that this deck doesn't really have good defense towards later, so you want to guard it while it's cheap is my logic with this deck as well. Okay, so going second, so you draw. So you drew into a Fairlander, which is perfect. So now you're going to discard Karna, and then ride. Alright, awesome. So now what you're going to do is there's some deciding factors you can do. So you went first, so the opponent's at 8k. So I'm going to go ahead and start by playing Shadow Cloak. You're going to look for an order. To be fair, the most ideal order you would get is something that could help you on the long term. You do have a card that you pitch a order and activate the skill. So you're going to go ahead and use this one, right? So get that. And then hopefully draw into another order that can help you up. And that's where the Philander kind of comes in here. So I shuffled it. Okay, it's cut. And then you're going to play Philander, look at top 5. And like I said, this is all randomized. So it's not like I'm doing this by how it is. I'm just showing you a raw version of like how the deck would be. So do you see how like the amount of cards in your hand is decreasing? So basically your defense option is very low in this deck. Okay, shuffle. So at this case, since your defensive option is low, just go ahead and call the card because it's a booster that you need anyways unless it's the deck that will retire your deck. So you can attack, drive check, swing. And you did get an order, so that's perfect, right? So let's say they probably won't even go for your Philander at this case. They'll try to go for your Shadow Cloak so you don't bounce off cards, so attack, and then they could attack. Do you need a counterblast? Not in your situation, so you can go ahead and guard if it's a cheap attack, right? So you take like no guard so you're at no damage. Here, so you're gonna go ahead and discard. Um, s- so I guess like technically you could have took a defensive because you do need to counterblast. If that's the case, just take the damage. So it really varies on the situation. So go ahead and discard the. You want to keep the order because you have one. So yeah, go ahead and discard the crit. On ride. Ride Zorga, activate skill. You're gonna go ahead and grab something. You're gonna Alchemy Magic this. Or you can Alchemy Magic this as well. So what you can do is grab this to your hand. Or you can grab this to your hand and just straightforward discard. But I feel like that ideally you want to have the second card for later. So go ahead and discard this. Okay, so you do need to try to set up here. So you do have a good setup. You do have the 2 cards here that can attack. You do have the Philander here as well. Because that you don't have a lot of boosters, you can call like other things to get the cards back to your hand, right? So here you want to activate skill. I'm at 6 energy currently, so you're gonna go ahead and pay the cost. Ideally for this, you want to save the order in your hand, ideally for the next turn. So you're gonna go ahead and just bind this one. So bind. And then you're going to call 2 cards that you can get to your hand. So let's go ahead and call these 2 out. You're playing over the Philander, so you can use the card that you binded to get it out. Okay. Since you need the counterblast for the order, you're gonna go ahead play the one that's free. So you're gonna play your order. Oh, they get +5, which it's kind of irrelevant to you at the moment. So you're going to play Habitat, top 7. So this is actually perfect, because now you can actually just play Philander in the back row. And since you played an order, you're going to play Shadow Cloak right away. Okay, so Shadow Cloak activates. Soul Blast, bounce that to hand. So you'll guarantee the 15k. And then here you're going to use Philander skill, top 5. Put another Philander to drop, shuffle. And I think this is why having 4 Philanders in your deck is very important for the filter in your deck. And then you're going to Alchemy Magic, skill, counterblast 1. And you're just call the other Philander, right? And since you Alchemy Magic, you're going to activate cards from drop. You're going to call the Prison Dragon. Gets the +10 and a crit Philander skill. And then with this, the front row gets +5. Okay. Yep, so like I said, it does happen where you kind of brick here. So you don't, it's either these 2. You can get, depending on the matchup, you can keep this in the deck and just pitch this. Or if you don't think you'll need this for the match, go ahead and filter that out as well. And then your front row gets +5 because this was Alchemy Magic. Okay. So ideally, you can call the Karna out here, but because of the fact that you don't really need the Karna at the moment, because that you went first and won't get the crit, you can just keep the board and swing. So this is some of the ideal turns that you would have. So deciding factor of what card to bind, what card, like what damage to take, what card to discard, what card to activate, and then the choices of your decks. So this all really matters on your first 5 cards that you drew into. So I feel like that running this gives you more options to do that. So that's what I do mention, is that you do want to run cards that is more ideally consistent in these type of decks. Alright, kind of proceeding here. So I'm gonna say that Habitat's the card that I kept in my hand, or I got back with the Grade 2's effect. So after this point, so you have 1 order at least, and then I'm gonna say at least have like 2 or 1 order that you can activate with a counterblast or no counterblast at one point. is the ideal setup that you want to do. You want to have at least one Prison Dragon or two in the drop, or with Karna as well. I would say having a Philander on the board, or ideally in the drop, is probably your ideal play here, because you're going to activate Zorga's effect, bind one of the two orders, call the two grade ones out, usually is the ideal play. As you saw in the previous second, where there is situations that you can't call the units out, so you have to call triggers with Shadow Cloak and get it to your hand. So there's situations that does matter, and obviously you don't have to have the Shadow Cloak on the board. This is just more of the ideal, because you're gonna most likely, if you have Shadow Cloak in your hand, you're gonna play it. But you can also have it in the drop too. It doesn't really hurt you at this point. So the ideal setup here is like to have one of each of the cards that you need and try to set up on board, and then kind of set up your board at this point. So we can kind of go off with the one hand and just kind of see how it goes, right? So let's say the Shadow Cloak was on the board here. Okay, so you did play and you took the 1 damage. There should be other cards, but it's fine. So you're gonna activate Zorga's effect. You do have the 1 counterblast, so let's take advantage of it. So you're gonna bind this, call 2 units on the board. You're gonna call these 2 here, right? So this gets the +5, this gets the +5. And then I'm gonna activate Fill in the skill, top 5. Cool, so you're just gonna dump the other one here. And this is all randomized, this isn't organized at all. So this is all completely random and just kind of true to what you have. The only thing that was set up is the cards in the drop. Okay, so you're gonna play Mystic Habitat, top 7. Oops. At this case, if you went first, you want to put the Prison Dragon. If you went second, you can just go ahead and put Philander. But to be honest, from my perspective, I would just put the Philander for better setup. So I'm gonna go and call that. So in Vanguard, you do as much as possible. Since they landed together, you can actually use the Shadow Cloak first if you want, or you can play Philander at this case. So because of this whole situation that you're in, ideally you didn't want to call Prison Dragon because you didn't want to put it on the board, so you call Philander, which is the ideal choice, right? So Philander skill, I'm gonna top 5 again. Let's just drop that to the... And then you're gonna activate skill, Soul Blast it, and put it back to your hand. This was placed, so that goes in the drop. And then this gives you another opportunity to set up your board. Okay. And then you're gonna counterblast. And because the fact that you don't really necessarily care what you're playing, right? You can go ahead and play this, and then the front row gets +5. Prison Dragon gets called because of the ability. Gets the power and crit here. And then you can just play over here again, top 5 for a better setup. You do get another Karna, so just put it down. And like I said, if you go first, it doesn't really matter if you call Karna or not, because it doesn't have the extra crit. And this gets the extra +5, so probably keeping is not the worst idea. Yeah, so like I said, the board's similar, right? Because you run so many Philanders, your deck filters. Ideally, if you don't go first, you want to swing, drive check first. You want to put the crit here because this automatically has a crit. You can go put the power here if you want, second, right? So if you hit the 1 crit, that just kind of helps your board. So that's the ideal setup, is that you want to have at least one of each of the cards I mentioned at the beginning. Alright, so another ideal question that most people ask is when do I exactly do the Divine skill? So I would say it's really about your board presence reading at this point. So let's say that you're on the offensive, you activated all your effects, and then you went first and you didn't Divine skill, because obviously you can't Divine skill when you go first. So ideally you need to have the soul set up, right? So you need to have this at least one soul for your let's say this goes into drop because you Shadow Cloaked, but let's say that you have at least 1 soul, and then obviously there's the two cards or the two cards that you called at least has a extra +10 from the skill. So it depends on like you look at the board state and the opponent's at like maybe three or four damage here, and one of these hits, it's guaranteed damage. So, and then let's say the opponent has about 7 to 8 cards, because that's pretty ideal here. So you want to bait out cards and kind of see. But you know that you kind of know what the opponent has. At this point, you're going to perfect guard check them, or you're going to try to force as much cards so the opponent can't hit you back when you need to. Because let's say that this isn't really the ideal hand that you have. Let's say you have like at least one order, 15, a blitz order, a perfect guard. So you have a decent hand to kind of survive here. So you have one 15k, one 5k, a blitz order, a perfect guard. Let's see. Something in that category, right? So let's say you have at least a perfect guard. So you have a decent hand to kind of get them back. If they survive your attack and kind of get you back. So I think ideally it just depends on the situation. But let's say like this is the ideal column that you have. You didn't persona ride because Zorga doesn't really persona ride, right? So now you're gonna go ahead and divines. Let's say this is the one that got the divines power. So all right, I'm gonna go off and I'm gonna go divines him. So activate skill. You're gonna bind the 4 energies. So it's the situation. Can you kill him? Or will he not be able to come back after you play your cards? So, boom. Alright, you're setting up here. Okay, so this has a +15, this has the +10. You have more than 10, so this gets another +10. So ideally, you're going to attack with the bigger column because you're going to restand with this. So you're going to swing. So this is 15 by itself. Expert, so 25, 35, 45, and 53. So this is 53. The opponent uses a perfect guard because it has a crit on it. Ideal, right? Or they'll take it, they'll be a 5. Let's say they hit 1 trigger. Okay, you're gonna swing. This is, you called it with the effect, so this is 33. Or, yeah, 38. Activate skill, you're gonna give this the +10. It has to retire at the end of turn. Divine skill is restand. So this is 63. 33, so swing. You're gonna give power here, crit here, right? So this is kind of ideal. Let's say that you did use the order, and then this is 73. The perfect guard, and then let's say the guard. So at least the perfect, they guarded like 83, so they have to at least use 48. They have to use at least another 15k on top of the 38. So 43, to play safe, they wasted 3 cards from their hand out of the 8 cards that they had. So they have 5 cards, perfect guard check, so that's 3, and then they have to guard this with another perfect guard at least. So they have 1 card in hand ideally. So this is the situation I am explaining, is that you do have to read the board, you do have to read the opponent's hand, and you do have to kind of remember what the opponent had in their hand or what they drove check. So you do have to kind of keep in mind, and that's like when ideally you want to kind of go off with Zorga. Alright, so that was a longer video than I expected it to be, but hopefully this kind of gives you a brief of how to play Zorga, or you know, how to build Zorga or how to play Zorga, for those of you guys that do like this deck and that wanted to play it because it has a cool concept. But yeah, hopefully I'll do more of these videos in the future, but this is something I did want to do for the new players that are coming in and that wanted to play decks like Zorga. That's kind of cool, right? It has a cool image, it has a cool concept, it's like toolboxing, so definitely do recommend it to try out. It's a very cheap deck as well because you don't need any of the staples in the deck, like the recyclers and such. So yeah, but make sure you guys comment, rate, subscribe on the channel, and see you guys next time.